week.
We discussed
Talking
that
about
last
sugar
week.
again,
Okay.
they did a study and they advertised for people suffering from depression of no known cause, and they got a load of people. What they did is they simply cut out all forms of sugar from their drinks. So whether they drink coffee, tea or soft drinks, they cut out all forms of sugar. All of them, almost all of them, got better in their moods.
Okay, let me ask you this, because I do like my I do have a sweet tooth.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a sweet tooth. Yet, how I can either substitute that with some sort of sweetener, and you've got and let's face it, there's now other substitutes which are coming from sort of natural plants which you can probably find in Whole Foods and places like that to substitute it. But if you and it's great creating the awareness of that sugar's a problem. But what's the solution to that if you do have a sweet tooth?
Well, the trouble is there isn't, because you see, the ultimate trick played on us is that in nature nothing sweet is bad for you. And what's happened is because of our love, because we feel that something sweet is therefore safe and good, that's one of the attractions. But the only thing you can do is to make a point of leaving out sugar but treating yourself occasionally. And when you do treat yourself, take something to reduce inflammation, like an aspirin, because they've also...
there you go. There's Theo pumping the pharmaceutical industry again.
Indeed. They've also found that, believe it or not, in some cases of depression, aspirin helps reduce the depression because, of course, it attacks the inflammation.
Actually, probably one added point to that, and this is a doctor said to me years ago when I used to smoke, that if I actually had half an aspirin a day, it would thin my blood, which would actually not that would make my smoking any better, but it wouldn't cause as much problems later on in life. I'm not sure how true that was. But the difficulty with that's the advice they used to give, and it is still true. But then the growing problem, of course, that aspirin does tend to damage people's stomachs if you take it long term. Oh, is that right? Okay, so there's a thing that's worth noting. But I've got to say, I hope you don't mind me exposing you on this one, because as soon as we finish the gym every morning, and we had a pretty hard workout today, and we're pretty sore. And, I see you going into your bag when we're in the changing room. Not that I'm looking. But I see you go for some sort of tablet. It's an over-the-counter tablet.
Well, I'm lucky because it doesn't affect my stomach.
Oh, right. So you take aspirin?
Yep, I've downgraded from Nurofen to aspirin because Nurofen is a bit more tricky on the stomach.
But why do you take it?
Two reasons. The main reason is because after a workout you tend to have inflammation, because we are not designed mechanically to simply go and pump weights. So we're designed to run across the savannah, to climb a few trees, and therefore the movements are not repetitive. And therefore when you go and pump weights, you will cause yourself a bit of inflammation. And if you give yourself inflammation repeatedly, then you develop fibrosis, and fibrotic tissue is not stretchy, and you're much more likely to injure yourself. So therefore the anti-inflammatory I take is simply to help reduce the inflammation in the body.
What's more of a natural thing for that? For example, you got someone like there was a basketball player from the Los Angeles Lakers called Kobe Bryant, who used to apparently, I think it was Kobe Bryant, or was it Michael Jordan? I can't remember. Kobe Bryant, he's recently retired, but he used to ice his knees twice a day, which obviously must have prolonged his career in some ways.
Absolutely, you're right. And if you do want to take anything over the counter, there's turmeric with black pepper, which increases absorption, is very, very effective in reducing inflammation. Magnesium
or you can go to the local
tablets,
supermarket and buy some turmeric and put it in your rice.
You can, but then it needs to be enough of it, you see, so tablets tend to be a bit more concentrated. Magnesium tablets are very good, and also omega-3 fish oil is very good to reduce inflammation. But again, some of these will have side effects. So omega-3 fish oil does thin the blood, and therefore if you have a tendency to any bleeding problems, so for instance people from certain parts of the world, the Mediterranean, might have a thalassemia problem, you will tend to
so let me ask you, so while we're on the pill popping subject, what's the happy pill? Is there a happy pill?
Yes, there is. It's called being with your family and having close friends.
Yeah, and what's the concentrated format for that?
being with your family, having close friends. In a community, and it means not destroying communities by sending your kids off to university abroad. Actually, if you send your kids to university abroad, it might be do a lot for their kudos and do something for your conscience about doing your best for your kids. What it means is your kid is going to meet someone abroad, fall in love, have children there, not come back, and suddenly you don't have a proper family anymore. And families only work when the extended family and the community are together.
Actually, it's interesting because we talk about structure, for example. I was watching a Netflix, out of all things, and I rarely watch it, and it was a whole series about the Unabomber. I think it was called Mindhunter, or whatever it was, but it was all about the Unabomber, and this was a guy who became quite anti the structure of the society, the way it was going, and believed technology was going to be the death of society, all this along those lines. So he was very politically influenced, and one of the things that happened to him was that because he was a genius, by the way, he was incredibly smart. He'd been put up 2 grades at school, so now all of a sudden you've got a young child who's in a class of kids who are older than him. So now he's got no connection with people his own age. The people who are 2 years higher in his class aren't really going to want to spend time with him. He was probably a little, because he was a genius, he was always going to be able to stand out from the crowd, so he was going to be a bit of a loner anyway. Eventually went to Harvard at 16 years old. He was a maths prodigy for some reason. But the thing is, it all led him to then became a professor at Berkeley University in California? Berkeley? So he went to Berkeley University, was a professor there for 2 years, dropped out, and then went and lived in a cabin in Montana since like 1972, and then sent letters and started bombing. So then I think 3 people died because
he was the FBI's most wanted, wasn't he?
Yeah, but the thing was, with him, when you actually look at the story, the guy had no social structure. He was taken out of everything that should have been normal for him. So you got all these prodigies and geniuses who are said, you are different, you are unique. And while we are told that we all want to be unique and we are all individuals, yes, we are. But the thing is we also need to be able to fit into a structure of a group.
Belonging.
Yeah, because this is where Maslow's hierarchy of needs it goes wrong. Because in terms of survival, and I think neuroscientists have actually pointed this out, or some neuroscientists have pointed this out, or it's their theory at least, when they talk about the survival stage, which is the bottom level of survival, which is food and shelter and things like that, they will put connection in that area, which is about two levels higher in Maslow's pyramid. And the reason why is because if a baby's born, it's got to connect with the mother to be able to survive. If you actually go and live in a tribe, or you've got to be able to connect with a tribe to be part of that, otherwise you'll actually starve.
And oxytocin is the hormone that does that.
And
mirror neurons affect your behaviour on top of that. So that you're right. That is the science behind it, and that's what we are designed for. We're not designed to function as islands. Correct. As indeed is almost every single living organism on the planet. Almost.
Yeah, the Western world has become more solitary in so many areas.
The Western world has not only become more solitary in many areas, individuals within the Western world have become more solitary, and that is the danger you've got. And you see it in every civilization before it collapses. If you look at any ancient civilization, they start off with very strict rules and structure and invincible armies because of it. And what happens is the more successful they get, the less anxious about everything they get, so they stick to the rules less, and they become prone to excess. So therefore, you've got the Roman orgies, the Greek dinners and excesses.
So there's something wrong with that?
And those precede collapse, because what happens is they then get superseded by a different civilization, which is hungrier and more anxious and more structured.
Well, hold on a second, because you've used that as an example, and I don't want to go down the whole I'm reluctant to almost go down this sort of sexual route. However, when you look at some of the, I suppose, swingers groups out there, because I remember I had I've known a couple of clients who were on the swinging scene. In fact, when I was actually doing neuro-linguistic programming, and I was doing my master practitioner, one of the girls that I actually had to work with was explained to me that she was swinger, but she was in a relationship, and it totally screwed my head up because I had no idea how to handle it. And the reason why is because I couldn't compute how, okay, you're a swinger, you have sex with other people, yet both partners have to agree. They've got to have their own code. They've got to have their own structure. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when I was speaking to her afterwards about this, it's that actually when they go to a club or whatever, they will perform. There's an agreement, but if one of them is away on holiday, the other one can't actually go. They shouldn't go to the club on their own.
It's very clever,
and a lot of them have a lot stronger relationships because of it.
Because it's structure. It's actually a structured way of dealing with the fact that we're not naturally monogamous. So all credit to them. And as far as I understand, it's usually the woman who instigates stuff. So the woman will go to another pretty girl and bring her over to the guy, and then the woman's free to go and get a man herself. But,
you seem to know a lot about this subject.
Well, a lot of people know. But,
a lot of people know.
But again, religiously as well.
Google it. Huh?
Religiously as well, the Muslims, what they do is they allow, as you know, multiple marriages, and also they allow mistresses in a similar way. But what they do is they structure it. In other words, if you acquire a mistress, if you acquire another wife, you have duties to them. And you have to respect your current wife and can maintain your duties to her. So therefore, again, it gives a structure to things.
But it's actually interesting. One thing, and
therefore respects women more, not less.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I covered it last week, and I talked about the statistics and its information because I was doing some research recently, and particularly in the UK and probably the States, I suppose, because more women are now going into the workplace and they want more careers, you're finding that the average birth rate has actually dropped. So we had the baby boomer stage where there was a lot more kids, which provided more money for the economy. Now all of a sudden...
It's because women are working.
Now all of a sudden women are working. So that's dropped down to 1.5 children.
Disaster.
Yet you've got the immigrant community who come with an extended family culture. They're still having 4 or 5 children, which is an effect...
until they become westernized
further on down the line, isn't it?
Until they become westernized. But you're right, of course.
Until they become westernized.
One argument, of course, is that the Muslims here are popping out the babies multiply, whereas the Christian Westerners are not. And again, I think it was you who, or someone else said, well, at the end of the day, can you imagine what's going to happen in 20 or 30 years' time in terms of the numbers?
Well, that's true. It's totally going to... It's certainly going to change the face of the way or what this culture is going to be over here.
Yeah, and Islam is, of course, a very structured religion.
It is very.
We just talked in detail about how important structure is.
But Christianity had its structure.
Yeah, but the thing is, all
Catholicism. Of a sudden, when you actually look at the different stems of Christianity now, you've got Presbyterian, you've got Baptist,
Nonsense.
you've got... what other ones are there? Methodist.
Okay, and you see, the trouble is that Britain is actually Protestant because the head of the church is actually Protestant.
Well, the head of the church is the Queen.
They're correct, Protestant.
Yeah.
So that's why Meghan Markle had to actually be properly Protestant.
But the reason we became Protestant is because Henry VIII didn't like the rules of the Catholic Church. In effect.
Very good point.
So he actually, so he changed
it. And yet, why didn't he like the rule? Because the Catholicism is actually much more structured and dictatorial, and yet the only religion to actually stand up to Islam is Catholicism. And in fact, the Spanish were actually kicked out the Muslims from Spain.
Sorry,
The Spanish kicked out the Muslims from southern Spain centuries ago because they had Catholicism behind them.
And then you got all the Muslims from the Barbary Coast, like Tripoli and Morocco, who would then go back and then enslave them. So it's
free agents.
interesting because the level of history that we're not told about. So there's so many gaps all over the place that we can't even process. I remember arguing with someone on Facebook not so long ago.
But it's actually the bigger picture, you see, we need to be able to focus on rather than...